sex acts or labor or services against their will.
Mm-hmm.
And the one exception to that is minors who are involved in commercial sex. So inducing a minor to engage in commercial sex is considered human trafficking, regardless of the presence of force, fraud, or coercion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like kind of the framework that we talk about human trafficking in the United States and we approach it. So that's, I think, is always really important to provide. But human trafficking at its core is about the exploitation of vulnerabilities.
Okay.
So traffickers are really good at identifying their victims' vulnerabilities and their needs so they can exploit them. So that can be something physical, like a safe place to stay or a meal, or it can be a less tangible need like love or a sense of family or belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So these vulnerabilities look different from person to person, but it can be somebody experiencing poverty, discrimination, whether that's based on race, gender, or sexual orientation, unstable housing, recent migration, family dysfunction, trauma or abuse, and or addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a few examples, but you know, it's important to understand like what the federal definition is, but also like practically how it works.
How it shows up. Yeah. Thank you for defining that for us too, because I like to connect that definition to maybe some cases we've heard about in the news here recently. Everything from, I believe it's Matt Gaetz, who was accused of sex trafficking. And I can't remember the name of the other politician right now, but recently his girlfriend was convicted of participating in human trafficking. I can't think of his name right now. It's killing me that I can't think of his name. But she was recently convicted, although he is now deceased. He was, they said he took his own life in jail. I can't think of his name right now. But in any event, it's been in popular culture all the way through to even the R. Kelly case. So I like to bring that into popular culture because I think people may hear of these cases and don't understand that it's much broader than that. But that definition, I think, really puts a target on what we're talking about. Can you talk about some statistics, Amy, about how it's impacting communities of color?
Well, I wanted to kind of build upon what Ayana said.
Sure.
People that are human trafficked are actually hidden in plain sight.
Okay.
I mean, and it's not even just sex traffic, it's human trafficking.
Sure.
I think that's, I think oftentimes we've taken, we only focus on the sexual part of it. We
Sure.
don't think about that there are other facets. There are 3 different types of human trafficking that happens. So these people are actually hidden in plain sight. You know, you may not even recognize them. They're sitting in the back of a kitchen working, or what you assume for them to be working. They're in regular nail shops. That lady who's doing your nails may be doing some sort of servitude or debt trafficking. A lot of people don't even think about that as well. So they're tucked away in fields, on farms, and in places where you would not seem to think of where you would find them. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with sex. It's modern day slavery at its best. If you, just to be clear, because ultimately you're being forced to do something that you really don't want to do. And it's even outside of the sex part. One of the things that people don't understand is that, or people don't know, is that this is prevalent all over the place. In the United States, the largest numbers of human trafficked people are going to be Texas, Florida, New York, California. And
is that related to there being a large populations of immigrants in those states?
There you go.
Okay.
Oftentimes when people come into this country, especially for those of us who cross the borders to come here, a lot of times they get caught up in human trafficking because of how they were brought here. I know that a lot of you can see what's happening at our borders as of late. Those Hispanics that are coming from South America up here, and the stories that you've heard of children gone missing, women being mistreated, we can't find these kids' parents and different things like that. there's a huge, Ayana, you correct me if I'm wrong, a huge federal investigation that's happening right now with trying to find out where are these children going, where are these young women going that have crossed over the border. So when we start looking at minorities, a large number of those within the United States, I'm only going to speak for within the United States that are being humanly trafficked, are going to be minorities. And another thing that people don't, I think you mentioned it, 70% of the people who are actually trafficked are women and children. We forget about the men. We forget about the boys. And those are people that we cannot forget, because those are the people that we look over.
Sure.
You know, when we start thinking about human trafficking, we only think about women and children. We seldomly think about young men, forgetting that there is a huge population of young boys who are being trafficked, not only in the labor, but in sexual trafficking, and you would never know. So I think for us as brown and Black people, I think that in this situation, we have to become more educated on what it is, and we have to be counted. I think that oftentimes what's been happening is that a lot of the numbers are skewed. When we talk about human trafficking, we talk about 20 million and 40 million that are globally trafficked. That is a huge number, that 20 million and 40 million. So you're trying to tell me that we still don't have a defined number of how many people are being trafficked. And even that number, from what I've been made to understand, is much larger than what is actually being reported. So would we ever really know the true statistics of how many people are being trafficked in the United States? I'll keep it to the United States. I really don't believe we will ever know, because again, they're hidden right in plain sight, and we can be on the train or on the bus with someone that's being trafficked and just not even know.
That is just remarkable to know. And before we get out of this conversation, I'm going to ask all of you ladies, what are some signs that we can look for of someone who may be silently crying for help? But I want to leave that till the end of our conversation. And I want to go now to Makia, is that correct?
That's fine. Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure I get it right.
Well, you know, from my perspective, certainly we look at trafficking from the United States Trafficking Victims Protection Act under the federal law, Title 18, Chapter 77, talking about coercion. When you look at a $30 billion industry, there are two things that you can tell immediately. One, there has to be demand for this, right? Where does that come from? We know that the predator is generally a man, generally. They use women to facilitate it, but generally it's a man.
Epstein is the name I was looking for, Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein, I think her name is Ghislaine Maxwell, something like that.
Yeah,
she was recently prosecuted in fact. Now, you're going to find that the predators, generally male, they're not going to fit a niche, right? They can be your pastor, your preacher. They're generally people who can afford this lifestyle. And if you look at Dateline, what do you see? Mostly white males.
Yes.
Afford it. They are feeding white males, they're feeding this particular appetite, this perversity. And obviously the people who suffer are the vulnerable, the poor, again, women of color, Black and brown. You talk about Native Americans disappearing. A whole nother conversation. We don't even have the research for that.
You saying that, and I want to let you finish, but you saying that and thinking about who the predator is and who the prey is, there is a historical link there that is blatant to me, that is blaring. This behavior is not new from what I can tell. It's just illegal now.
This behavior it is illegal now. This behavior has been going on for centuries. I mean, why do we have all these laws? Because we had slavery.
That's right.
We have a history we have not just an American history, a world history
That's right.
of imperialism, colonialism, slavery toward one specific group of people, Black and brown people. When we talk about this, I guess you would call it a chart, or it's called power and control. Who's in power and who do they want to control? It's a very simple chart that you're looking at, but it's specific, it's systemic, and the causation is very specific. The demand is specific. Why was slavery, why did it go on for as long as possible? Slaves are human labor. They're people. Guess what? They procreate. They're renewable.
That's right.
Sex slavery, same thing. Your people are renewable. You can always go back into the pool of poor people, vulnerable people, Black and brown bodies, and it's about power and control. So I know this is a whole different way to look at it, but when we look at crimes involving violence to other persons, a lot of time we look at the dichotomy, that's the word I was looking for, power, who can control it, and who's the victim.
Right.
And here it's so discernible, it's so clear to me that we have supply, Black and brown bodies mostly, and women and children, the most vulnerable, and the demand is coming from 33 and older, white collar, white males.
How often do we see these white males caught and prosecuted and convicted? Okay.
Hardly. You have to have high profile cases. They are hardly ever caught. Guess what? Most of the cases you see in state court are prostitutes, not the John.
Wow, that's right.
Being honest.
That's right.
We're not going after the perpetrator. We're going after the poor innocent. Well, not innocent, but you know what I mean. The
sex worker. The sex worker. And sex workers have made a choice to do that type of work. And yes, it's illegal, but if you're gonna prosecute one, it should be both for breaking the law. Yeah.
Exactly.
Stephanie, I want to just jump in real quick and kind of correct you a little bit. You're talking about sex workers. Just to correct you, they don't make a choice. They're actually forced.
Okay.
We start dealing with mental health and Stockholm syndrome and different things like that when we start dealing with people who are codependent on their captors. When you start dealing with sex trafficking and you start seeing that these young women run back to their pimps or run back to the alleged boyfriend, you have to understand that there is a street terminology used that is called finesse. These women at this point have been finessed, and they are under the impression that they are in dire need of this individual. So when these women go to court or get arrested for solicitation, more often times than not, we never take a step further to start looking at
the why,
who put them to work. Or we do not look at the Johns. For many years, the person who goes to jail is the person actually performing the act. In the United States, it's only been within the last maybe 4 or 5 years, and Makia, you correct me if I'm wrong, that we've now started to look at the people behind the sex trafficking, the people behind the alleged prostitution, that now we are now holding them responsible. There's a case in Camden, New Jersey, where 5 women were rescued from sex trafficking. The person who trafficked them and finessed them got 0 time. He was charged with nothing. The young ladies now were charged with solicitation, prostitution, everything under the sun that these young girls could have been charged with, they were. But he walked away scot-free. So if we really want, in order for us to start addressing human trafficking, we also have to start addressing the captors of the people who are being trafficked, because ultimately at the end of the day, human trafficking is going to exist whether we want it or not. But if everyone is not being held accountable to the same standard, then it's going to continue to be this $1 trillion industry globally. And of course, the people that are ill affected by this are going to constantly be Black and brown people. And men
Amy,
like Epstein are going to be able to walk away scot-free, honestly.
And Amy, I would go deeper than that, Amy. Amy, I would go deeper than that, because the pimp might very well be a Black or brown person who's also working for the system, because it's systemic. I would say you want their clientele database.
That's right.
You want to see what hotels they're going to. You want to see what executives are visiting these brothels or homes. You want to see where they're flying out, what parties they're, what. It's so much deeper than just the John and the girl. It really is. It's the clientele. You want their clientele.
Because if there is no demand, you don't need a supply. And the people who are making these demands, to your point, Makia, are those who can afford this lifestyle and who desire this particular kind of labor. It could be someone who owns a business and who does not want to pay a fair wage, or this particular kind of sexual proclivity. And until we are able, and that's why it's big news when those lists of Johns come out, and their executives and their politicians. And as I sit here today, I know there's a reason why Jeffrey Epstein is no longer here. And that's just my personal opinion. Because he had the key to a lot of information about a lot of people, and it would have been more explosive than it even turned out to be. I love this conversation, ladies. I want to ask another question and turn the corner just a little bit and ask, what has the impact of human trafficking been on the LGBTQ community?
I'll go ahead and start on that one.
Sure.
So I did talk about how human trafficking at its core is about exploiting vulnerabilities. And when we talk about vulnerabilities, LGBTQ people who identify as LGBTQ are vulnerable to human trafficking. And that's because of the discrimination they face, harassment, family rejection, violence, like financial instability, all these different factors that come about because of people's sexual orientation or gender identity. And LGBTQ youth of color in particular are vulnerable. And that's because of the intersection between their sexual orientation, gender identity, and race, poverty, all the things that come systemically with being a person of color, all the issues that you face, those things in addition to all the things that, come about from being identifying as LGBTQ.
Can we stop there and address this through the lens of religion and children being ostracized from their families because of that? Can you talk about how that may make a queer identified child of color more vulnerable to human trafficking?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we talk about that rejection, that family rejection, that usually ends up with people being homeless, having to leave their home and not having a place to stay, food to eat. So then those needs come about, and traffickers are more than happy to swoop in and provide those needs in return for, being able to exploit that person. So I think it's very much connected.
That finesse is easier if you're vulnerable.
Yes.
And in legal terms, we have a certain name that we call it. Because we call it grooming. Probably heard that term too.
Yeah.
So the type of cases that I have seen are typically like boys or girls who are being in these awkward sexual situations, who end up not wanting to testify or even be involved with the legal system. And this is mostly victims in general, but specific to that category, the abuser is generally someone, the very first abuser is going to be someone they trusted, like a pastor, a teacher,
family member.
we had this problem in the DA's office where we would have Thursday morning meetings, and I kid you not, every child molestation case was basically a single mom who brings a boyfriend home.
Ooh.
That was the majority of our cases.
Yeah.
So, education, who you bring home, who you're dating, who you're trusting your children with. It's bad enough you got to send them to school and church.
Mm-hmm.
The person you bring home is the first point of contact, because I think the sexual traffickers, a lot of times you'll find vulnerable women with children. That's your supply right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Women and children, single mothers with children. This is something as a community we have not talked about. We don't really. But if you look at the statistic, most children who are sexually assaulted are assaulted by boyfriends, stepfathers,
family members, even people
family members
who have access and who they trust. I've heard that, and so many people I know have had that experience. And I don't know anyone, at least I don't have knowledge of anyone who's been human trafficked. But I do know a lot of people who have been made vulnerable unknowingly by family members.
And that's the first step to making a child vulnerable to a sex trafficker. Because when you've been sexually exploited by the people who love you, guess what? You're now in a position to be exploited by others. So a lot of the times you notice that people who are in sex trafficking, or they're vulnerable, they have a drug problem, they have mental disabilities, or they have been sexually abused.
And this speaks to some of the work that I do. My master's is in psychology. And so the work that I do really deals with people and those initial breaks in trust as children, and how those breaks in trust impact their behavior long into adulthood. And it could be something as serious as that or something as minor as that. But when that happens as a child, you don't know who to trust, and someone giving parents of being a trustworthy person, but really not be. And so that finesse, I love that word, Amy, the finesse is now can enter, because this looks like a trustworthy person. And if you're vulnerable, you're hungry, you don't have a place to sleep because you've been put out by your parents, because you've now identified as queer and you just want a safe place to sleep. What we call the bottom level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't feel safe, if you have not eaten, if you have not slept, you are very, very, very vulnerable. And I think that speaks to how this can impact queer communities of color, especially youth. And I'm interested, Amy, in how much of this has touched the work that you do.
The one thing is that I want to talk about is that when we start talking about the finessing of, especially when we start dealing with girls, this is where I push a lot of my education on parents. Oftentimes, parents are not aware at all that their children are being finessed, or that their children are actually having conversations with people they should not be.
Sure.
These social media apps, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every social media app has a back door that a lot of us parents, because I'm a mother of two, do not know how to finagle. We also have to take into account that our children now in this generation are born with a tablet in their hand, a cell phone in their hand. They are very tech savvy. A lot of parents have no idea that Facebook has a hidden messages compartment in the back of Messenger, as does Instagram, Twitter.
That's right.
And TikTok. And a lot of these predators, because that's what we have to call them, we have to call it a name. The predators use these apps to begin to not only groom, but to gain trust. And a lot of our young adults and youth, because, oh, this is my friend on Facebook, this is my friend on Twitter, this is my friend here.
Right.
They feel comfortable enough to meet. And this is where we as parents have to be extremely vigilant
Mm-hmm.
in our children's internet usage.
Absolutely.
One of the statistics that we had in New Jersey and Pennsylvania is that we found that a lot of the young girls that were being taken or that were being forced into sex trafficking were young girls who came from two-parent households.
Yeah.
You would never think two-parent household. Why in the world would you go with someone else? It doesn't, I know we were talking about the different intersectionalities of people needing a place to stay and different things like that, but oftentimes it has absolutely nothing to do with them needing that need. That's not to say that that is not something that is prevalent. However, we also have to look at the other side of the coin and address the fact that we have regular children who are naive enough to just walk away with someone that they think is their friend because they've exchanged a couple of messages on Instagram and social media and they feel, it's not a bad person.
That's the condition of being a teenager altogether. The rebellion of being a teenager, the vulnerability of being a preteen and being
and the
groomed.
Naivete that people
Correct.
that everyone is your friend.
Correct.
And the fact that we as parents are not having these difficult conversations with our children.
Yeah.
And especially our daughters. Because our daughters go missing more often than not.
Sure.
And they're not finding our daughters. Our daughters are gone.
Yeah.
And to bring that full circle, this is where we as a community have to not only educate ourselves, but educate our children. My daughter just turned 14 on Tuesday. And ever since she was 10 years old, I used to take her to the Blue Moon Hotel in Philadelphia. And people used to think I was crazy because I would take her. But I took her so that she can see what it looks like.
That's right.
What human trafficking looks like. What it is sex work look like. And to be honest, can my daughter be finessed today? Quite possibly. But not because she hasn't been taught.
That's right.
But now it's probably because the predator would have to find another way. And even then, I've created such a space with her for us to discuss this, that even if it's in her thought process, she's going to say, wait a minute, my mother told me this, and she showed me this. So this is kind of looking and feeling like that. Let me go have a conversation with her. And I think that we as parents, and we as mothers especially, we need to start having these types of difficult conversations with our daughters because they are going missing at a staggering rate, and they are not being found.
Let's talk about that against the backdrop of social media and the backdrop of this need to be seen and accepted and liked, quote unquote, by people who are in social media, people they maybe never even seen before, but this constant desire for acceptance and this constant desire to feel, I can't think of the word, but to feel desired in some way or another. And also weave that into what media is showing young girls, especially young girls of color, what they should look like. And for example, I mean, young girls of a certain age. I went to a basketball game at Clark Atlanta University, and I was shocked to see, or even a high school game, girls who wanted or had lace front wigs, eyelashes as long as my fingers, and my fingers are very long. It's like when you get these things, that's a rite of passage for you, but that's because young girls are being told that this is the standard of beauty, and they're constantly seeking validation from social media. Now put that against the backdrop of, it could come from a two-parent home, or it can be a child who is more vulnerable because they don't have, the basic needs that most children need to feel safe. I want to put that up against this concept of finessing and this concept of vulnerability, and talk about how parents can intercede, Amy, to your point, and not push their children away, but create awareness about the danger of what's happening. Because as we've talked about, the psychology of an adolescent and of a teenager is to test boundaries. They're trying to see who they are in this world. That's a natural thing. Every human being goes through that. But today, as a parent, it is, and I'm also a parent of an 11-year-old boy. It is a difficult balance to say, okay, this is your boundary, and also the door is open. I'm still here for you. I'm not pushing you away, but there are boundaries. Can you guys talk about the importance of how parents can stand in the middle of that to be some kind of barrier between their child being in danger and maybe their child having the very basic tools necessary to say, no, I'm not going in that direction?
It's simple. Get involved.
Right?
It's really not hard. It really, I mean, no disrespect. It really is not that hard. Be present. I mean, we have these children nowadays, and if we gonna have a transparent and honest conversation.
Let's go.
Now.
That's what we like. That's what we like.
Let's be honest now. A lot of us prop these kids in front of iPads,
Correct.
TVs, and everything else, and let those devices raise their children. And then situations happen where now the children are placed in vulnerable circumstances and situations, and now you are expecting us to jump up and down, which we still do, to come and save your baby.
Accountability.
See, now, in
Accountability.
that situation, now I'm gonna have to look at you because at the end of the day, you are what dictates what happens to that child. If that child is on social media, first of all, my daughter is 14 years old and she don't know nothing about a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Nor does my son.
Because we are dealing with the fact that the media plays such a role in our daughters that they feel that they are not enough. Let's start right there.
That's where I wanted to go with this. That is exactly where I wanted to go.
We got Meg Thee Stallion twerking all over the place. We got my Dominican sister Cardi B telling people it's okay to go jump at folks in the strip club and all kind of lawlessness. Those have now become our daughters' standards, role models.
That's right.
I completely agree, Amy. I completely agree.
Have not stepped in and said, "Oh no, boo, I'm your role model," and not only be the role model, but be the example of what a role model is. Yeah, you can look at Meg Thee Stallion. Yeah, you can look at Cardi B. Yeah, you can look at 21 Savage. You can look at whoever you want to look at. I get it. However, this is reality. This is the life you live in. This is the lens you need to view life. And
well, let me stop you there. Because I'm going to challenge that, but I want to give Akia a chance. I think she wanted to jump in, but I love playing devil's advocate in these situations. I agree before I do that, let me just say, I agree 100% with everything you're saying. I subscribe to the Obama way of raising children. You have to earn your screen time. I subscribe to that. But I want to get to Makia first, and then I'm going to challenge that because not everybody thinks like the folks that are right here. So go right ahead, Makia.
Right. Well, I come from it. I agree with you as a parent. My children are on lockdown. They don't have phones. They don't have internet on their phones. You want to make a call. In fact, you're at school. What are you doing calling me?
Exactly.
So, they have a school. They have a school. The office. You can go to the office like we used to do and call if you need help. Right? You don't need
have a teacher call.
Exactly. Have somebody else call. However, here's my professional take. Since I worked with juveniles. And they used to make some very poor choices. And parenting is definitely key to how your child behaves. But you would have really hardworking parents who worked all the time. That was probably the only thing going on with them is they were not present. How do we deal with a situation where mom really needs to pay her bills and be at work? She can't have eyes on you 24/7. She can tell you do your homework, but you might just want to go hang out with Bob and Bob's friend. And all of a sudden, somebody does something to you, and mom's really upset at me, the prosecutor, going, "What are we going to do with Bob?" I'm like, "Bob's only 14. What's your child doing at the park having sex with Bob?" So here is the issue. We have a serious problem with what our artists and entertainers is selling. The daily diet is toxic.
Yes. Yes.
Extremely toxic.
Yes.
When a girl refers to herself as a B and thinks that is okay, is not offended when somebody calls her that. They all call each other that. When you listen to the way they talk to each other, because I've been around people else, my mouth stops. I'm like, that's insulting. Why would you have somebody call you such a derogatory thing?
Yeah.
That's how they talk to each other. Now, if you use derogatory language to refer to yourself, you talk about yourself like you are worth less.
Yeah.
You talk like you're trash, and you let boys talk to you like that. Guess what? We have all a culture, and this is also part of systemic racism.
Yes.
Because the way that we have been referred to by white culture is the way we are now referring to ourselves. I don't know if anybody else is seeing this, but why would you call yourself the N-word? That is not cool.
I think
you can't make a word like that cool on any given day. I'm sorry, it's not a cool word.
I agree with both of you, and I want to juxtapose this against that backdrop because it is systemic. The reasons why children are being raised by, when we were kids, a television, and now today iPads, all kinds of screens. All kinds of screens. Why the parents aren't parenting is because in a lot of cases they haven't been parented. And it is systemic in the thought that a lot of this harkens back to the breakdown of community and family that took away that presence that was once there in our community. And it's just not right now. And what it's doing is leaving our kids vulnerable to people who appear to be filling in that gap. And if you are a working parent, which I had a single mother, fathers who were there every so often, but a single mother who worked all the time. She, I still have fear from her. I revere her, and that's what I mean by fear. But today, kids haven't been parented, and so they don't have that same fear. How do we then interject as a community to try to support and step in places where parenting is missing? And I don't mean, your kid can't be down the street and get a whooping like they used to when I was a kid. Like if I was down the street acting out, someone could grab me up, tell me to stop it, and then take me home and I'm gonna get in trouble again. That's gone. Like people just don't community parent like they used to. So I guess what I'm leading to are, what are some solutions, guys? The problems are very apparent. They're systemic. They are community-based. They are in our homes. But how can we then become a part of the solution? If we see something, how do we become an advocate for someone who may be in danger?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ayan.
It's something that we've all kind of been discussing now, that you all have said to some degree, is something that our organization has been trying to drive home for so long, is that human trafficking is just a symptom of like larger societal, economic inequities and issues in our society. So, we're talking about poverty. We're talking about people having parents who have to work because maybe multiple jobs because they're not making a livable wage.
That's right. That's right.
We're talking about even going back, talking about, specifically women of color. Black girls are adultified more so than white girls. So then they become more vulnerable, but then also they're not treated as victims or seen as victims of the situation that they're in, the same way that, they're not in need of rescue. They're not in need of help. They're not in need of support. This is something they chose to do. So these are all tied together. Trafficking doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's part of these larger issues. So when we're talking about what we can do to make it better, we have to address the root causes. So we have to protect workers, give people livable wages. We have to support families, make sure that, the systems that children and their parents interact with are supportive of them, and people are not being ripped away from their family members in dangerous situations. Schools are equitable, not just dependent on where you live and how much money your parents make. Homelessness and housing insecurity has to be addressed. These are all things that feed into be into human trafficking happening. And I'm so glad that Amy earlier, you did point out that it's not just people who have these like physical vulnerabilities and needs, but you can come from a quote unquote normal, stable family and be trafficked because you have other vulnerabilities. You know, you want attention, you're not getting the right attention, you have low self-esteem, and people prey on that.
That's right.
So addressing all these larger things that are at the root of it is really how we can prevent human trafficking from happening.
Amy, I'll go to you.
Whew.
It's a lot, right? It's a lot. It's a lot. You feel that system weighing down on your shoulders like, wait.
It is systemic.
Yeah.
When it's systemic, it's a class issue.
Absolutely.
It's a finance issue. It's a lot of different things. Now, for me, in my nonprofit, the Poder de la Mujer Latina, I see human trafficking from two different lenses. I see human trafficking through Black and brown women, and then I see human trafficking through white families. The help that white families receive as opposed to those of minority descent is so flabbergasting that it makes you want to scream. So when we start dealing with how do we begin to fix this? How do we begin to have equality and just how we treat people as human? It's such a fundamental piece of this that I'm gonna be really honest, I don't see it being rectified in our lifetimes.
Correct.
Okay.
I agree.
It's sad.
If I can jump in,
Go ahead. I agree.
I think there is hope. I think there's plenty of hope, because the fact that we're all having this conversation means that we're all working toward the same goal, which is protecting Black and brown bodies and victims of sex trafficking. And I think there's hope when we do certain things. One, we need representation at every level of government. If you don't have Black and brown people speaking up for Black and brown people, guess what? You're going to get left behind. Now, you know, the Civil Rights Act, all that stuff, that was like, what, 70 years ago? Not that long ago. Our lives are still being devalued because there are those people who still live, who still have power, and they don't want us to step up and rise up and do better.
That's right.
We have not had the ability to be engaged politically less than a century. I mean, that is, to me, that is astounding. So when you talk about victims being treated differently, why is that? Is it because the resources are not there? I don't think so. It's because the people who are in power, or the people who are ensuring those resources get to the victims, aren't doing their job. If the resources are there, they should be getting to victims regardless of race, gender identification. So we have the resources, and we can ensure that these things are happening the way they should, but we have to have the right people doing the job. We have to have LGBTQ representation. We have to have women of color representing us, men of color, white people. Everybody needs to have a seat at the table, because if you don't have a seat at the table, guess what? You will not be counted. I think it's that simple.
To kind of to jump on top of what you just said, as I am an elected official in the state of Pennsylvania. I sit on the Pennsylvania Democratic Committee. I'm the first Latina, the first openly lesbian to sit as first vice chair in that position.
Congratulations.
For us, for myself, I just had a conversation with State Representative Susan Wiles and her team, just discussing the lack of color in certain rooms.
Sure.
I sat at a meeting as first vice chair, and myself and my president of my committee, his name is Hamza, are the only two people in a meeting of 40 of minorities. That in and of itself is shameful. And to your point, Makia, we have to be at the table. We have to put ourselves in those rooms and make sure that we push and get our elbow room and show people, hey, we are here, we are valuable, and we need our people to be helped and saved. If COVID-19 did not show us anything, it showed us how we are still back 75 years ago to the Civil Rights Act that you talked about. We are still in that place.
Yeah.
Yes, there have been certain laws that have been brought into action that supposedly help us. But if we really have to be honest, we still have not gotten our just desert. We're still being treated as second-class citizens.
Well, I want to jump in right there, because this is something that I talk about all the time as it relates to, and this will, I think, wrap this conversation in a nice, neat bow to what we're talking about right now is political action. We're talking about legislative action and presence of diverse cultures and people in a country that supposedly founded on that concept. But the civil rights movement became what it was, not because it started in legislation or it started in politics. It started at the grassroots. It started with people saying, we will not support this bus that will make us sit in the back with the nasty, dirty fumes. I'm not spending a penny on this bus. I will walk to work. I will ride my bike. We will give each other rides, but we will stand in solidarity with one another on a grassroots level. And that is what sparked the changes that started to happen in politics and legislation. It was that grassroots movement. It was community banding together and saying, no, I don't care if it's just my neighborhood, just the Montgomery, Alabama bus system, which is probably as big as my hand at the time. We're saying no to this. And that is what I want to get to, because I'm seeing so many comments, guys. I see your comments, and thank you. I see you chiming in. And first of all, everyone is cheering for you guys and agreeing with what you're saying. But what I want to make sure we leave these people who have spent their time with us tonight with are things that they can do in their own communities. How can they wage their own personal battle and be that one drop in the ocean that creates waves where they are, to be a help or something that prevents or help someone who may be in the middle of being human trafficked. I like to say that my personal rebellion against systemic racism is to help people heal their hearts, heal the things, their childhood traumas that may be preventing them from seeing themselves as a whole and healthy human, which will stop them from being able to do so many things in their lives. That is my personal rebellion against systemic racism, because I understand healing yourself and seeing yourself and valuing yourself will help you to go so much further in life. And I can't touch everybody, but the people that I touch, that's the energy I touch them with. So if you guys were to leave these folks here with something about how they can wage their own personal battle against this systemic thing that we've all identified as a systemic issue, what would you leave them with tonight?
Run for office. And I know that it sounds like something that far-fetched, and I am going to be the first person to say I never thought. Run.
Okay, that's one.
Be a voice. Go to the city council meetings. I know that a lot of people think that, oh, it's worthless, it's a waste of time. No, it's not. That's where a lot of connections and politicking actually happen. And Makia, you can attest to this, because I'm sure once you start put yourself in a room. Somebody said, how do we get to the table? Okay, well, I'm gonna tell you how to get to the table. The same way our ancestors did in the 60s during the civil rights movement. They got up and did something. We are such in a microwave society. We're expecting this to happen like this. No, let's be clear. King marched and was beat just for us to be acknowledged as humans. And we're just talking about human trafficking on tonight, but this is such a bigger picture. We have to force the door open. Obama did that when he pushed himself into office. Let's be clear. We can do the same thing too. Mm-hmm. There should be no reason why that in 2020, I am the first Latina to openly gay anything in the state of Pennsylvania.
Agree.
That should not happen.
You have a powerful voice. That is your platform, but everybody cannot be like you. We need people who have other battles. I am not disagreeing with you. I agree. People should run for office and vote and be politically involved and aware. Who are your local politicians? Who are your local judges? Who is your solicitor general? You know, who are these people that are responsible for the legislation and of the laws that you live up under? Where your tax dollars going? Be aware of those things. But also, there are other ways that you can be a part of this battle. And so one of those, from Amy, run for office. I'm here for it. What else do we have?
I'm one of those people who would not be able to run for office. It's not my thing. But I think that, advocating for policies and making sure that you're supporting the right people to make the decisions. Yes. People always focus on national, state level elections and things like that. But locally is where change happens the most. And that's where things affect you and your community the most. So just being aware of what's going on locally. Also, to bring it back to the issue at hand, human trafficking, understanding the reality of human trafficking is really important as well. I think that's a first step that everybody can take. There's so much misinformation out there, so much sensationalism out there about what human trafficking is. And I think really just educating yourself on the reality of it and what it actually looks like is so important to be able to identify. Because when we're thinking big picture, like, Taken type of things happening, and we're not seeing people in our community. We're not seeing our friend who's being groomed online by some guy. We're not seeing, the person who's a domestic worker for our neighbor being forced to work. Like, we're focusing on these larger things. We're missing actual trafficking. So educating yourself on human trafficking and advocating for policies and electing officials and people who can make the decisions that will improve your community so that human trafficking can be prevented.
I love that. Run for office, but also be aware. Educate yourself of what's happening in your neighborhood. Educate yourself about the laws that are being enacted. Who's making those laws? You have to be educated about what's happening in your local neighborhood, and that definitely has a ripple effect and will touch other higher levels of government. So I'll leave the last word to you, Makia.
Well, I think we all have different strengths. I never envisioned that I would be running, kind of like you, Amy, for an office where a woman.
I can imagine both of you running for office. First of all, I just met you for this last hour. I see why you've done it. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A woman of color. Listen, in the past 25 years, the incumbent is a white Republican.
Yeah.
He's been there forever. And I will be the first woman, also the first Black woman in that office elected.
Let's go.
So my county is conservative and red, and the idea of a Black woman running for that office is like pie in the sky, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't want me there, but I'm going. I'm trying.
That's right.
So here's what I have to tell everyone in this room today. You have a gift, and you need to figure out what that gift is, and you need to share it generously. It could be reading to children.
Yeah.
It could be helping in the soup kitchen. It could be knocking on doors for a candidate.
Yeah.
It could be any of those things. It could just be helping your old lady down the street get her groceries for her once a week. But just be involved with your community.
Yeah.
Help where you can and find whatever your gift is and share generously. I started a reading initiative in my county for kids who don't have anything to do on Sunday, so that they're not looking at the screen and Googling and doing social media.
That's right.
We're reading. For the very first time in their lives, I brought them a real Black author, who's also a Christian, and had her read to them and sign their books. They had never experienced that in their whole life. I thought that was pretty amazing.
That is awesome.
Love to make, exactly. So do something that you are good at, that you love. What that you want to teach people how to bake or cook, whatever it is that you do and you love to do, you want to share with your community, do it, because you could be taking a kid out of a bad situation.
Absolutely.
Helping someone. Like Ayan said, victims, we just don't know who the victims are. But if we're not involved in our communities and we're not really engaging our community members, we're not going to be able to be effective or to be helpers or to really make a difference. So that's all I have to say. Find your joy, share it generously, and like my mother always tells me, if you're doing something you love, it's not work.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that. So find whatever your gift is, be generous with your gift. Gifts are given so that you can give them. They're not given to you to hold tight to or to even explode your ego. They're really there for you to give them to other people. And in so doing, you make someone else feel seen. You make someone else feel safe. Maybe it's a conversation, if it's a child, that they can't have with their parent, but if you're in that child's life, they can have it with you. And that very conversation may prevent them from going into a human trafficking situation. It really comes down to, guys, community. For me, the bottom line is community. And I know that as we've talked about, it is systemic. There are economic issues that are attached to this. There are educational issues that are attached to this. There are legal and legislative issues that are attached to this. And of course, there's the money. But if we're talking about something that you can do in your neighborhood, it is showing up. It is absolutely showing up in a way that makes someone else feel seen. And keep your eyes open. I'm not sure what that looks like, but before we go, because people are asking for actionable items. I love this. The people in the comments are asking for actionable items. What can they do if they suspect that someone may be in a human trafficking situation? They're asking for a part 2 to this, lady. So I don't know. Amber might be calling you again. They're asking for a part 2 because people who are here, they really, really want to be engaged and really want to help. So I would leave you with all of the things that these ladies have said. Run for office, educate yourself about what's happening in your community and the laws that are being created and who's creating those laws. Give your gifts and also be a part of your community. Be aware of what's happening in your community. And as you show up, you create a safe space for someone to maybe open up to you in a way that they may not feel safe to open up in other places. I know that we're over time, Amber. I want to stop it right there. And I want to thank all of these wonderful, wonderful guests. Ladies, it was my pleasure to meet you and to be a part of this conversation. This is educational for me. If you're watching the comments, they're just going up. Thank you. Great job. Heart, heart, heart. High fives, like everything. Everyone has loved this conversation. So Amber, with that, I'm going to pass it back to you. They are asking for a part 2 though, Amber. I'm going to tell you that right now.
I'm actually going to pass the mic over to our kind of like the co-host of this, which was Atlanta Black Pride. And we also had our lovely Kappa Alpha Lambda sorority. So I'm going to let Miss Tiana Jackson say something and then I'll close it out.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tiana. I am a member of course, Kappa Alpha Lambda sorority. I'm also a member of Atlanta Black Pride. I want to just say I am so glad that, you know, we were able to have this much needed discussion just to bring about awareness to this issue. So thank you to all of the panelists, Stephanie, Amber, Atlanta Black Pride. Thank you to all my sorors who are online, who were able to join. As mentioned before, the Polaris Project is a big initiative for us with Kappa Alpha Lambda. And I was so glad that I was able to take part in this discussion. And so my hope is that, you know, we were able to save somebody's life tonight or, you know, to help save somebody's life at least. So thank you.
Can I add one more thing, Amber? Ayan, Amy, Makia, if you guys have, really, because folks are asking for this, if you have any kind of, I don't know, brochure or something that maybe you can pass to Amber, and Amber, you can pass to the people who are in the room, just some actionable items that they might be able to take away from this, I think that would be great.
So I'm going to say this. Thank you guys very much. Our panelists, I appreciate you all. Stephanie, you know, much love always. Here's the thing I want you all to take with you, those that are watching, take this conversation offline. Continue it, even though we've given you some thoughts, continue having this. Take this to when you go to work tomorrow and you round the, you know, what they call the water cooler, if that's such thing going on anymore. Have this conversation. Continue to have this conversation. The second thing I want to challenge everybody on, I know it's hard because of COVID, but get to know your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Know what kids are like. If you got small kids in your neighborhood, or you got teenagers, or you just get to know. Say hello to somebody. Sometimes saying hello can save their life. And you know what I'm saying? And it also, we don't ever know where somebody is, right?
That's right.
The third thing is my biggest thing, and people have been saying it in the comments that I've been watching, is vote.
Yeah.
Go out there. You have a voice. Your voice is on a local, on a state, and on a federal. You want the best people to have your interests at heart. And when it comes to human trafficking, hey, we can stop it. And I think that this is one. And yes, I will work very diligent to try to have a part 2. I cannot promise, because Atlanta Black Pride, we have a huge year-round programming for 2022. So I am definitely going to try my very best to get us another round of this, because I think it's important. But one of the things I will commit to is within the next week, our website, we will have a page with this video showing again, as well as the information from each one of these great panelists that will give you some resources and how to get in touch with them. Okay. Because I know that they do not mind us going to them. And if you need help, I will be putting that number out tomorrow, probably tonight, so that people can get numbers. They can call people, get help. If you know somebody, I know how we all feel about taking in strangers and that kind of thing. But if you know somebody that's going through something of this nature, just pray and reach and help. All right. So ladies, I appreciate you very much. And audience, we can do this. We can make a difference. Atlanta Black Pride is always going to be doing things of this nature. It is our motto to educate, empower, and celebrate the Black and Brown LGBT community. So I appreciate you all. You have a wonderful and safe night. And I thank everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.